All right, everyone, if I could have your attention, we're going to go ahead and get started with our programming. I'm so glad everyone is enjoying the company of all of the guests, meeting new people, enjoying the conversation, and we are going to get started with our programming. Over the years, we've worked with a lot of organizations and a lot of wonderful people. And one of the nonprofits that we've been proud to stand side by side with is a group called Republicans Against Marijuana Prohibition. My friend and colleague, John Bauckham, serves on the board of our organization and also of RAMP. And he is here to join to talk about Ann Lee and the memorial that we have for the great life that she lived. Welcome, John.
Yep. Use this one.
Yeah, thank you, Heather. Great to see everybody. Really excited for Heather and the team putting on this conference. It's been an excellent morning. I know the afternoon will be great as well, and then all day tomorrow. So as I look around, it's amazing to see a lot of familiar faces, but most importantly, a ton of new faces. I know since I got involved kind of in 2012, 2013, we've really seen a massive change in the cannabis policy in Texas, thanks in large part to Heather's work and many others in this room. I know there's many other folks from a business perspective that are starting to get involved, and we're excited to see how that continues to grow. We did want to take a moment just to acknowledge Ann. So Ann passed away late last year. She was really a stalwart in the conservative movement, as well as in the cannabis movement here in Texas. I know for anyone in the room that had the chance to meet her, I'm sure you have a great memory of that interaction. We got a couple things we wanted to show, just a really quick video. I actually have here on the QR code a link that'll have the whole video. So this will take you to the YouTube video that is about 15 minutes long, and really goes through Ann's story and the story of RAMP. And we wanted to just play a few minutes of that first. And then I just wanted to close with a few additional comments about Ann as well as Richard. So while Heather's pulling up that video, I'll just say Zoe Russell, Zoe, wave your hand, also part of the RAMP founding team. And she provided on your tables a New York Times obituary for Richard Lee. So many of you know Richard, kind of a pioneer in the cannabis space, ran Oaksterdam University out in California. So a really great piece there that you can take away with you as well. So with that, we'll just start a quick video here.
Oh, it's not on your head.
That's for me and John.
Maybe share your screen.
I don't know. I've just been toggling back and forth between.
Maybe drag it over. Drag it. Yes. Actually, yeah.
All right, hit play.
The problem is just getting rid of this screen. It's only showing on there.
Oh, I got you.
Well, okay. We just need to drag the video over and connect it like screen one, screen two.
Yeah, it should be deep. Yes.
Oh, it should be.
Yeah. We can, there we go.
And then this.
You want me to try?
Yep, there we go.
Okay, now we're ready, guys. Sorry about the technical difficulties. Struck me as so bizarre.
From NFL Parish in Louisiana. My maiden name is Edward. And the Edwards was always very active in Tangipahoa. My father was the mayor. When he died in 1966, he was the mayor of Ponchatoula at that time. since the late 1800s until today, except for one 20-year period, and Edwards has been the sheriff. Right now, the sheriff is Danny Edwards, a brother of John Bell Edwards, the new governor of Louisiana. These are all cousins that I grew up with. So being political has been part of my nature. I've always expected to be a part of the process. In 1970, we had just moved out to this area. And at the time we moved, our congressman was George H.W. Bush. He was a congressman for here from 1966 to 1970. In 70, he gave that up to run for Senate. And we had a wide open primary to take his place in Congress. And my husband knew Bill Archer. So we had one of the very first coffees for Bill Archer when he ran for Congress in 1970.
When I first got involved in politics and cannabis reform movement, I didn't talk to my parents for most of a year because they were totally against it. They're very conservative, longtime Republicans.
One thing I can say, I think I've set a record, because after every primary, you have a precinct convention. And I have conducted or attended every precinct convention in Precinct 315 since 1970. My husband and I were very united on this issue. We've been very united on politics. I always said that I came to Texas in 1946 to go to the University of Texas, and there I met Bob. And as they say, the rest is history. And he not only made me a Texan, but a Republican. The whole idea of our drug policy reform started in August of 1990 when our son Richard told us that marijuana was good for him. If there was anything I didn't want to hear, it was that. Because I had fallen hook, line, and sinker for all the lies and propaganda the government had put out about marijuana. We soon learned about a group called DPFT, Drug Policy Forum of Texas. And they used to meet once a month. I did not know cannabis or weed or anything like that. And the more we studied it, the more we learned about it, the more we realized that it was not only good medicine, but that much harm was being done by the laws. And the thing that I find such a mystery to me, such a mystery, is why I find Republicans just enforcing this law like it was handed down from Moses. And it was a law that came about during FDR, during the New Deal in 1937.
My mom came from Ponchatoula, Louisiana, which is just north of New Orleans. We're talking the deep South. She grew up during very racist times. And I think now she is trying to do something about that history of racism and to keep it from continuing under the guise of drug laws.
I grew up with a bad law that said whites and blacks couldn't go to school together. That was called the Jim Crow laws, the segregation laws that came about, promoted in the South by the white Democrats. And that was bad law, and bad law needs to be changed. And now the fact that we have the bad law of the drug war, which has given us the new Jim Crow, is just haunting. It's caused so much harm to people. And there's another side to this, because Republicans have always been very fact that they are pro-life. And I think it is pretty hypocritical to say you are pro-life and anti-medical marijuana. Pro-life has to mean more than just preventing an abortion. Pro-life has to mean the quality of life. And that is nice, we do want to prevent an abortion, but you prevent an abortion and then you have a child come who needs marijuana to control their seizures from epilepsy? Are you really pro-life when you say they can't use it? So to me, it is very hypocritical to say that you are pro-life and anti-medical marijuana. RAMP came about in
We're gonna pause it there. You guys can
2012, and we were in Los Angeles.
So we'll pause it there, and you all can check out the rest of that video as well. But As you can see, Anne, very well educated, very passionate. I think for her, the most important things were her religion and her family, and having this issue really come from Richard, and have her to have the courage and conviction to open her eyes, do her own research, and find out that cannabis wasn't the demon that her government had been telling her that it was. When I first met Anne in 2012, she was already a legend in Harris County politics. We were actually at a training. You heard her talk about conducting all of those precinct conventions, typically after the primary election. So we were at a training, learning how to work the new voting equipment for a primary. And as we were walking out, I saw Anne walking across, and she had a lapel pin with a medical cross with a marijuana leaf. And I just thought those two things don't go together. This old lady with white hair and that marijuana pin. And so I wondered, like, should I stop her and say hello? And so I did. I said, "Hey, Anne," I said, "Hey, I like your pen." And she turned around and looked at me and walked over. And we sat there in the parking lot for about 45 minutes. She was just laying into me with, she mentioned Richard, who I actually was well aware of. I knew that the federal government had come in, to essentially retaliate against him for the proposition that he bankrolled in California, and they tried to destroy his business and his university. And so along with Zoe, Jason Miller, and Bob Lee, we said, let's put this together and make this organization into something where we can get some members. We can start having local meetups. We can get to the Capitol. I think one of the proudest moments I saw with Ann was the first time that we took a charter bus, filled it up in Houston, drove over here to the Capitol. Just to look in her eyes, seeing all these people that had rallied around this cause, joined this movement. Everybody has a personal reason for why they're here today and why they're involved in this movement together. And to see that coalesce around something that was, honestly very taboo in 2013 and 2015, you would really kind of get laughed out of any of these offices. So it's because of you, the folks in this room and elsewhere, that have allowed us to have more of an adult, legitimate conversation around cannabis here in the legislature. And, Ann is just someone for me and my family. We grew up, together really as close personal friends. I think when my daughter was born, one of the first trips we made was over to Ann and Richard's, and I have a picture actually with both of my children with Ann and Richard holding the two of them. And just a really special person, and something for me to say, even within the GOP, sometimes where you have a very taboo subject like cannabis, don't be scared to let your opinion be known. Even with all the chaos that's going around right now in our country and our world, don't be scared to be that voice in the dark, because you never know if the person sitting next to you is just waiting to join you or waiting for someone to lead and get up and follow. So I appreciate you guys allowing us a little bit of time to kind of remember Ann here today, as well as Richard, both stalwarts in this movement, both fantastic people, and really laid a lot of the groundwork for us to pick that up and carry it. I know for myself, since I've had children, I've taken kind of a step back in the movement as well. So we were joking earlier that when you drop the ball, it's amazing that you could have somebody following behind you to pick that up. Just remember, when you get discouraged or kind of put down, look around you and think of all these faces that are here supporting you, this objective as well. Lean on them and lean on the support system. Lean on Heather and our organization for anything that we can help provide to you to make you more successful in your endeavors. Just remember, actually, as a Longhorn, I gotta say, hook 'em for Ann and Bob as well. I much prefer having it here than Texas A&M University, but it is kind of in the shadow of the Capitol here. It's hard to sometimes remember and even think that it's true. But the politicians do work for us. They do follow their constituents, sometimes very farther along. I know Ms. Pittman mentioned that a lot of the legislatures would say, I agree with you, but my constituents, I don't know, I want to stay in office. And honestly, they're not really having those conversations with their constituents. They're not doing the polling. So by you making the phone calls, sending the emails, making those office visits, continue to build that relationship, that's why we are where we are today, and that's why we'll continue to go forward. So I appreciate you all being here. Heather, I appreciate all your effort, and I appreciate you letting us have a few minutes to remember Ann.
Thank you, John.
And with that, we will move forward with our keynote conversation. It is a pleasure to welcome Representative Darby and Senator Johnson to the stage to join us. Welcome, gentlemen. So grateful to have you both. You both come a long way to join us here in Austin, and I appreciate that. Representative Darby is a long-serving representative, first elected in 2006.
I'm glad you use long-serving and not old.
Yeah. He represents 10 West Texas counties and chairs the House Energy Resources Committee and is a leader in major energy issues in the state. He also serves on the Administration and State Affairs Committee. And as we all know, he, in the State Affairs Committee, got a front row seat to the hours-long hearing and the legislative overhaul of Senate Bill 3 during the regular session. And as a supporter of the committee's substitute version of the bill, Representative Darby contributed to that overhaul, transforming it from a prohibition bill outright to a bill that's more in line with sensible regulation that protects minors, but allows adults to be adults, much like the governor called for during his veto. So we are so grateful to have you with us, Representative Darby.
Thank you.
And we have Nathan Johnson, Senator Johnson, who many of you know because he has been a leader on cannabis for a number of sessions. He represents Senate District 16 in Dallas County. During the 89th legislative session just last year, he filed a comprehensive cannabis reform package, a pair of bills that would create a regulatory framework and decriminalize adult use. He focuses on a number of issues, including government transparency, criminal justice, and of course, cannabis. So welcome. They're so glad to have you both.
And energy with my friend Representative.
And energy, yes. Very good. Caring about lots of issues, and we appreciate that. What a year 2025 was, huh? I mean, we were all a part of it here as advocates, y'all getting that front row seat as legislators and seeing so much action happening. Let's talk about the committee work. We'll start with you, Representative Darby. State Affairs, getting kind of thrown into the fire with this issue coming to State Affairs for the first time. Talk to us about that experience.
Well, it's good to be with you. Good to be with each and one of you. I've got to confess, this is not my first time on the campus of the University of Texas that we're talking about weed. I was here in the late 60s. Okay. Very, very, very emotional time for our country and certainly this campus. And then went to law school across the street here. So during the early 70s and late 60s, you might suspect that the topic of weed came up quite often, either in my presence or not. But certainly, you know, hearkening back to those times, this state has undergone significant changes in the last 60 years, and I think some attitudes have certainly changed. So when the issue came before the State Affairs Committee, of course, I had not delved directly into the legislation. As you might suspect, with over 6,000 bills filed, we don't really track a lot of the efforts in the other chamber until they get before us. And so we were generally aware of what the Senate was doing with regard to this issue and the total ban. And I try to keep an open mind. Certainly I have ideas as to where I think the discussion should lead. But I was largely uninformed as to the size and extent of how you have grown your industry, and certainly the practical effects of legislation passed at the federal level and what impact that had in developing your industry here in Texas. And so I was very open to sitting in on those conversations. And I don't know how Mitch Fuller with the VFW and his advocacy there, they were always there, but I don't know how many hours we sat in there. 18 and a half hours. And I think the bottom line is you have developed an $8 billion a year industry in this state. There are 10,000 small businesses that have grown up in support of that business model. Your presence is in almost every one of our communities. I have 31, I think, shops in San Angelo, Texas that I represent and from. I was aware, but I wasn't appreciative of the effect that this industry has on the state, from the number of employees, the number of businesses, the amount of taxes that you pay, sales taxes and other taxes that you pay. So it was an opportunity for us to sit down and kind of dig into the details. And what we heard was not only from veterans who are directly affected by access to this industry, but we heard from a lot of individuals that were directly affected. We had whole offices from various businesses come down. In fact, I think I questioned one business out of Fort Worth. I think every one of their employees came to testify before the committee. And I probably was predisposed to the ban at first, but after hearing the testimony, it became clear to me that prohibition doesn't work. And it was not the right policy for this state to engage in prohibition because of the real life effects with people here in this state. I'm certainly appreciative of what the sacrifices our veterans have made. I understand the wear and tear on their bodies and the continuing issues facing them, and the options are very limited. Certainly no one wants to become addicted to opioids, and there are very few options available. So I was always predisposed to compassionate care. And so, you know, as we started listening to the testimony, we would talk in the back. There would be hours we'd sit, we'd go back for a restroom break or grab a bite to eat. And we would talk amongst ourselves about the idea that let's stop, roll and reorganize and try to maybe regulate. And that's really where the hearing took me and the committee to let's regulate it, let's police it, let's tax it, let's protect Texans, let's protect something that that is important to a lot of people in this state. And so that's when we had a complete about face, and Ken King filed a bill to regulate using the model of the alcohol beverages and the age restrictions and the protecting children, locations, all of those things came under the regulatory purview. And so we passed it out. It gets on the floor, and then the Senate kind of takes it back over. And so anyway, I will tell you, it was transformational for me, listening to the real life experiences of folks who are affected, the real life experiences of folks who find this as a source of relief. So thank you, Heather, for that.
Thank you for sharing. You know, a lot of the time as an advocate, especially, you know, we've been doing this a long time, from being kind of an outlier and now being integrated. It's so refreshing to hear from lawmakers who heard from the people here during testimony, and it made an impact. It makes a difference to educate them, to help them better understand the issue. And I'm so grateful that you've been able to share that with us. Of course, we went on to face challenges again with that legislation, which we can get into a little bit more, but I'd like to shift gears into the Senate. You don't know anything about facing challenges in the Senate, do you?
I do, especially on this one. It was, I mean, it was a weird year, 2025. And so while the House, you know, if you look at the traditional, the way you think about the House and a Senate, the House is representative directly of the people, and the Senate's supposed to be this body of wisdom. It hasn't actually served that function lately, and this issue no more than any other. And I think sometimes, particularly in a conservative philosophy, you say, hey, no regulation. We don't want business regulation. But the absence of regulation can actually cause the collapse. And in this case, the legislature kind of was asleep at the wheel. As industry grows, you need to have regulations in place so that responsible producers, users, marketers are able to operate within the law, that people are protected, that people have confidence in the industry, and you preserve the ability to participate in this industry, and people have the ability to make individual choices about their health and the things they consume. And what happened is we had a few examples of bad actors, which turned the Senate into a raging anti-THC machine. And I was told at the beginning of session, I was so excited that the Ken King and Drew Darby, these really good thinking legislators, were going to finally take this on and create a regulatory regime. And then this ban is coming. And then we got hit with all sorts of evidence. And I appreciate the narration of the process over in the House and the process over in the Senate. We are hit with stuff that's really kind of scary. And so the thing comes over and there's a ban, and I'll just admit to the whole audience, my record looks a little weird on this. I did draft what I think is the most comprehensive legislation in the country on this subject, but before I did that, you'll find a really weird vote by me in favor of a ban. And it's especially weird because you'll see I entered in the record, I'm against a ban. So what was going on? And what was going on? And this is inside stuff. I had been talking with the Republicans and the Democrats in the House. There was no way a ban was going to move. I'd also been trying to decriminalize marijuana for 6 years at that point. And while they're talking, while the lieutenant governor's working on a ban, I'm like, if you guys ban this stuff, you're definitely going to need decrim. So let me get some leverage here. And let me send a signal to the House that when you do regulate this stuff, take it seriously, because these guys advocating for a ban, there's some real concern underlying it. So there's this whole process going back and forth, and I'm talking with my staff, and I want to highlight the work done by Jordan Cooley on my staff, who just put dozens, if not hundreds of hours on this very complex subject. And so we were excited to send a message, and I said, Jordan, if it comes back a ban, it's not going to come back a ban, but if it is, you'll be damn sure I'm going to be voting against it. It came back a ban, I voted against it, and I was so disappointed that I decided to do my own legislation. I thought this was going to be taken care of, and we started with Ken King's bill, which was an excellent piece of legislation. How can we make it better? And then we did bring in all the players in this process, from the growers all the way to end-use consumers, from compassionate use under medical programs to vendors, mom and pops, larger industries, and got everyone together. How can we actually improve on what Ken King did? And at the same time, we got to have decrim of marijuana. And now with the federal legislation coming in and regulations coming from HHSC, we need to continue having this conversation, because certain things are going to be kept illegal, and we're going to still have these problems of injustice through the criminal justice system, criminalizing people who are making responsible decisions for themselves. And we don't want that. So this game is still very much being played right now.
Yes, beat goes on, doesn't it? That's the cycle. So you laid a little bit of context about the hearing and overhauling the bill, becoming regulatory. You mentioned that, of course, it didn't end up staying that way. Can we talk about that a little bit in the House and how that pressure, I mentioned in my opening remarks that one chamber was holding another hostage in order to advance a wildly unpopular idea to put enough pressure. And I remember a conversation with the Texas Tribune that you had about that. Can you talk to us a little bit about the pressure the House was in to flip that bill back?
Well, first of all, I want to thank the senator. He and I worked together on a lot of issues, and a lot of the work that we do between the chambers is behind the scenes, direct staff to staff or member to member. And to say that there was pressure, certainly the House understood the philosophical opposition and the hard opposition that the leadership in the Senate had with regard to this issue. But yet we're hearing back home from folks who live and work in our communities in the industry or using the industry. And so we're committed to good policy, but then at some point there was pressure about whether or not our other priorities would even make it to the finish line. And, one of the difficulties in being an elected representative is we don't just represent one facet of our communities. There are education issues. We'd already been through a pretty tough session, several sessions, several years about education, vouchers, that sort of thing. That was still fresh. We've been through a lot of sessions regarding how do we fund our roads? How do we fund our hospitals? How do we fund the infrastructure of this state? And so we as elected representatives have multiple priorities because we represent everybody in our district. And so the idea that all of that legislation, perhaps, I'm saying perhaps, might be in jeopardy unless there was some movement on this issue. It strikes the very fabric of what we're about, and so there was some talk. I don't know how well founded it was. I don't know how serious it was, but it was prevalent. As we discussed the issue on the floor, there was some amendment to take it back to the original language, and that amendment was successful and passed. And then goes through the process, goes to the governor's desk, and the governor vetoed it. So,
and the brinksmanship is real. Yeah, honestly, I wanted to thank members here and the whole network, because that veto was driven by the activism. And there were many of us in the legislature that breathed a tremendous sigh of relief. You know, I had my pressures in the Senate and in the House. The brinksmanship is real. And legislation or politics is really ugly. It's brutal. And you have to make decisions that you don't want to make, where, you know, I hate this a little bit and I hate this a lot. And it's a tough process. So fortunately, the pressure that you all put on resulted in the governor's veto. That's when I came through with my legislation. So let's start this over. And then, of course, the governor has sent it over to HHSC, and we've got a whole new set of potentially good things and problems.
Yes. What does it say? What does it mean that when the governor of Texas, Governor Abbott, vetoes a bill like this and instead says, let's let adults be adults, let's regulate this instead? What does that mean for the future of Texas?
well, I mean, clearly it sets a pathway that the governor sees the state needing to follow. I think it's an important policy direction that the governor, who's elected to lead this state, has set that policy direction, and it's important for the legislature to recognize that, and where possible, and we agree on the policy to implement that policy. The work is still ahead. I mean, we're still there's an executive order that is in place right now, and there's some changing. It's changing at the federal level. I don't know how you navigate. When I was headed over here with my staff, I said, there's so much confusion in this policy arena right now between, you know, what is the legislative directive, what is the directive and direction, and what is the governor's plan on what does he see? He set things in motion. Dishes has a directive. Have you registered? Did you register your issues with regard to those rules? I mean, hopefully you did. But then you have the federal government weighing in with their policy changes. And so I don't know of any area that is so in flux than this issue right now. I do know that we're going to take it up. We almost have to take it up. This is a huge industry. It's a huge policy decision. And so hopefully we can arrive at the right pathway for consensus. And that's what I would recommend to each one present. Continue your advocacy. It has made a difference, but don't stop. The work is still to be done, and we need you to weigh in and to make your issues known, and hopefully the legislature can come together and get to the right spot.
I think there is no question that the governor's veto would not have happened but for the pressure from THC advocates, and but for the Republican affiliation of many of the people who are THC advocates. I'm a Democrat. I don't know what's going on in the governor's head. I know that the polling was terrifying if you're a Republican governor, because you put pressure on him and he decided accordingly. And so now the whole issue, hopefully it lines up before the legislature. It's not entirely done at the regulatory level. I think now we're getting into these philosophical questions about what is the role of an agency versus what is the role of a legislature. Are we legislating through agency action because the legislature can't get its act together? Maybe, right? And I think the legislature should be involved because there's more of us and we have more time to hear more from more of you than the agency. Now, agencies have a function in making rules, but your pressure is important. Your partisan affiliation was important, sometimes unfortunate from my perspective, and you're welcome to talk to me too. But I have no doubt that the leadership was listening on this issue.
this industry continues to mature and will moving forward. And I wonder what kind of resources do lawmakers need? I mean, we talk about the personal experiences. You've heard about it. You know, the businesses are going to be shut down, the people that need access. Diving deeper, though, to the reasonable concerns that people can have with shifting into a legal and regulated market, cannabis being more widely available and widely used. What are some of the public health or public safety concerns that need to be addressed when we reconvene in January at the Capitol?
I know, I mean, if I start? Both in the bill that Representative Darby worked on and Representative King worked on, and that I worked on in the Senate, we're concerned with the seed to sale to use. And when you have a regulatory regime that is tracking and testing the testing and weighing and being consistent in the application, being consistent in enforcement, funding the mechanisms that handle all of this stuff, making sure that licensing is done appropriately, you have not just a public faith in the industry, but the real opposition to the industry is a couple of extreme examples. And all you need is 2 or 3 of those, and the whole world is just terrified. And when you have a responsible regulatory regime in place, I think people have much more confidence, and you're much less likely to see the kind of adverse health consequences that result either from accidents or from bad players in the industry.
I would just tell each one present as you move about your business, as a father of 5 and as a grandfather of 12, fixing to be 13, I worry about proximity to children. There are 31 shops in San Angelo, Texas. 31. Most of them are located near schools. A lot of them are located near Angelo State University. We have to have some restraint and some recognition that if you're going to put something near schools that our children have access to you, then you damn well better police who comes in your store. Because if you don't, that's the quickest way I know to have this blow up. You have to regulate your industry. To the senator's comments about, do we legislate or do they regulate through rules? I mean, that's the problem. We implemented a law. I'm a rural guy. I have farmers who can't make money on crops. They needed a cash crop. Hemp was an answer. Okay. But then there was a regulatory void. And so all of this has developed in a vacuum, as the senator says. And so without that oversight and regulation from the state level, we have what we have today. But you need to come up with rules, regulation, business practices that self-police. I know that's hard in business, but absent your efforts to protect our children and our communities, then I promise you there will be a train wreck in the 90th legislative session. So as DISHES tries to develop these rules, as your industry evolves, I think there has to be a great level of self-restraint. I think you have to recognize the dangers that people who know nothing about your industry, but they see that vape shop right across the street from their school. That is where you're going to have to help. Not only being advocates, but you're going to have to help and self-police your industry.
And even advocates for the regulation itself. And in our process, we had a great deal of support for the regulations that we wanted to impose, age limits, where at the point of sale. I mean, I get I've sent photos of THC gummies on display near the cash register right next to the Skittles. And I'm thinking that's probably not going to be very helpful in the 90th legislative session. So when you come in and you advocate, you want to advocate not just for the legalization, for the ability to produce, sell, and consume, but also to have that structure that gives the public reassurance that this isn't coming for their kids. that this is something that adults are going to be able to use when they're ready to use it. And so when you're supporting the regulation, you're actually supporting your own industry.
Well, in packaging, like the censor says, I've been in a convenience store, I thought I was picking something up for the grandkids, and I actually read the package. It looked like a child's gummy when it's not, but it has the cartoon characters on it, and those bright figures on it that unless you read it, you don't know. So those are the type of things. I know you're marketing, I know you want to sell your product, but anytime you go down that road, you're playing with fire.
I think there's a lot of agreement on that. And part of the rules that have been recently proposed do put in place standards for marketing and packaging, child-resistant packaging, for example. In some of the legislation, I don't think it's included in the rules, but as a pushback from schools, alcohol is 300 feet. I think that might be reasonable here. But that kind of work. And I really appreciate you talking about the kind of self-policing. And I think that's a part of our maturing industry, is having those resources become available for folks. During this conference, we're going to have a session focused on operating with integrity, adopting best practices, standard operating procedures, ensuring that your staff is well trained so they're prepared to handle situations like the lieutenant governor walking into Happy Cactus to try to bust them on something or catch them off their guard. And he got ID'd in this hemp shop. And he says, "Oh, I'm the lieutenant governor." He said, "Sir, we're still going to need to see that ID." Yeah, they are here. That's right. Yeah, Todd Harris. Yep. And those are the examples of how this industry in part is already operating with integrity, but making sure that we're instilling that sense of culture within the space as we continue to mature. So excellent points there. As we move forward, we see right now we're kind of in the midst of this regulatory progression. And some of it's good. We've mentioned some of the good things that are included. A couple other additional things I'd mention are recall procedures, adverse effect reporting. That's one thing that we don't have a system for, is when a product does cause harm to someone, how are we tracking that? Are we identifying whether or not it was the cannabinoids themselves, or was it produced poorly? Was there something else in it? Should it have been on the shelves to begin with at all? And so how do we, as we work with regulators, how do we develop better relationships with regulators so they understand the industry well enough to regulate it in a way that makes sense? What's that relationship look like?
I think you've already started. You're identifying right now concerns that the HHSC might not have in mind. Legislators, I'm ignorant on the subject. I'm absolutely relying on you to anticipate problems or be aware of problems that I haven't heard about before it becomes a spectacle, and come in and say, hey, we need to be able to have some sort of reporting requirement. Can we get that in there? Help us write the legislation that builds a comprehensive regulatory regime where you can run your businesses and people don't get hurt. So yeah, bring your knowledge to us, I guess is what I'm saying. And there's 181 legislators. Most of us are pretty easy to visit. So I would encourage you to bring your knowledge to us.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much about this industry that most of the elected representatives don't understand. The synthetics that are derived, I mean, the hemp flower and some of the new decrees from the federal level about the 0.4 milligrams, and I mean my eyes just rolled in the back of my head and glass over when you start talking about percentages and weight and all of those differentials that play into your industry. But the more you can educate your elected officials, the better. And we need to know what the boundaries are. I mean, I don't know the difference between, 0.4 milligrams and 0.3. And I mean, what does it mean for an average sized guy that weighs 200 pounds or maybe plus? Whatever you can show us, to your point, and it varies from human being to human being. I realize that, but if there are standards that your industry uses in crafting and manufacturing, and are there limits that your manufacturers have on what these products can contain, and then how do you test it? How does law enforcement test it? Say we set limits. Well, what's law enforcement? I mean, how's law enforcement test that? And I think that's going to be a real challenge facing us moving forward, Senator, is, when we actually do set some of these limits, we're charging the law enforcement with enforcing that. And so have we given them enough testing equipment and training for them to do that?
And the funding stream, right? I mean, the proposals for these licensing fees are, wow, generating vastly more revenue than needs to administer the program, but having enough to send some of it over to law enforcement is very important. The other thing I think is important is credibility. If you come in and advocate for your product and you talk about all the good things it does, you can be saying 100% true things about all the good things it does that we know and we recognize and appreciate. Also come in with a story, sort of like they always tell you, if you want to make a friend, admit a flaw or something like, come in with something that went wrong or something that could go wrong. So the legislator hears that from you and doesn't think you're just trying to wash over and make sure you can make money, but like, hey, listen, I want this stuff to be safe. And there's this incident over here and this mom called me and, I think I know a way we can stop that from happening again. Then you've got tremendous credibility in that office, and you probably convert that skeptic into an ally. And only some of this stuff. So bring your full set of knowledge to us, and together we can help craft something responsible.
I really appreciate that feedback. I'm a big advocate of addressing concerns that people have. Don't shy away from it. Let's lean into this stuff. Let's address it head on, so that we can have reasonable conversations. The facts can be laid out on the table and we can find solutions. I wasn't going to mention or put anybody on the spot about flour, but you brought it up. And
Quite honestly, I don't know what it really means, but I just read it.
Well, I'll tell you, it's the raw flour of the plant where most of the cannabinoids are concentrated, and they usually process that and turn it into product. And the way that I look at it, it's the most natural form of the plant. And sadly, in the proposed regulations, they're going to change the way that they test for THC, making it so that effectively flour isn't going to be on the market. There's no demand for super low THC. And instead, we're sending consumers to the illicit market, where we have no safety controls, no age restrictions, anything like that. Thoughts?
Which is why we need decrim. And what I was thinking about doing is take marijuana decrim, lump in the hemp flower. And so at a minimum, that market's going to continue. It's just going to be illicit. At a minimum, we're not locking people up for using the purest, least adulterated form of the THC delivery mechanism. And so one avenue is to go that way. Another avenue is to completely re-examine how we calculate the limits. Is it THCA? I've seen the formulas. I don't retain them, and I don't quite know what they mean. But yeah, I do think we're creating a problem where we don't need to, and we need to be addressing it rather than putting people in jail or pretending we're not seeing it, which is also eventually going to be a problem. So I think the main problem we're having right now is we are obsessed with differentiating between marijuana and hemp, even though they're kind of mostly the same plant, right? And really what we're talking about is a molecule, THC. And if we can regulate the molecule, I think the complexities that are tripping us up are going to get less complex. And I see somebody nodding their head, a couple of people nodding their heads who understand this better than I do, which is good, because we'll need your help.
I'm not so much concerned about the molecule. I'm concerned about the synthetics that are derived. That's where I see a lot of abuse occurring, largely because people are not aware of actually what the product contains. Right now, this country's undergoing a phobia about any country not named the United States, and they see the possibility that our foreign adversaries are using the chemicals to somehow infiltrate our country through some of these products. And so we just have to keep trying to diffuse that and talk about the real issues. But the synthetic part of it bothers me as much as anything else. And so I don't really know enough to talk intelligently about that, but I would just, we have family friends that have had a daughter or a granddaughter that has not only abused the product, but it's the synthetic derivative of that multiplied by tenfold or 20-fold that has created havoc in her life and addicted her unmercifully.
And that's most certainly going to be something that we have to address during the next legislative session. And part of that conversation is identifying the different cannabinoid sourcing. So we have the natural cannabinoids, we have converted cannabinoids that come from a natural source but are converted, and then we have entirely synthetic products. And some of those are causing harm, and we want to make sure we're taking care of not only defining them, but also creating paths for how do we identify what is safe and what isn't. We had an excellent panel earlier just before lunch talking about that. And so the video will be available for us to kind of dive into that a little bit more. We also have another scientist talking about testing, incredibly important. So I'm so glad you brought that up. And we've got the I think it calls him the chief nerd of the forensic science lab here, Peter Stout, and he'll be talking about the impact of these cases in labs and the need for more funding for testing. So we're going to be talking a lot about this stuff. So I'm so grateful to hear that they're on the right track, that these are the concerns that need to be addressed, and we're going to be diving into that a little bit more. We have some time for some questions if y'all are up for that.
Can I do one other comment about that? I think that we could use your help on, or that maybe we could help you on. With the federal proposals, as I understand it, and the HHSC proposals, we're going to be looking at yet another industry dominated by just a few gigantic players, particularly in Texas, where we're proud of a small business history, and that's not partisan. I think that's something to lean in this session too. Do we want to preserve a competitive marketplace for this, or do we want to turn it over to a couple of corporate behemoths that are going to rig the regulatory regime in their favor?
Free markets. Lean in on that.
Markets.
Yeah, that's right. I think we do have time for Piper's up first. You know, she's ready. If we could have somebody grab the wireless mic, and that way we can make sure that everyone on the live stream hears the questions.
Thanks. So I know that when teacups began, we were one of the first state-run programs who didn't have any type of awareness campaign. And I'm wondering if there's any thoughts or discussions among legislators or regulatory bodies about creating an awareness campaign, not just that we have teacup, but I think, bringing people over to teacup from hemp could possibly, contribute to improving some of these issues. But also, we could have, there's people in cannabis have advocated throughout the country at conferences and things like that. There's people in cannabis who don't know any of this stuff that you don't know. Cannabis is a complicated plant. It's got a lot of things. It's been underground for ages, and that's why we don't know enough about it, because we need to bring it out to the fore and study it and understand it well. But is there any talk about having an education campaign that could contribute to better public health outcomes? Thank you.
I'll take a crack. The teacup program, to me, is critically important. Again, Mitch and our veterans made a very strong case on the need to be expanded. We did that. The number of dispensaries has increased, I guess, another 9 from 3, so we still got some more to go. I know that there was a rush to find locations all throughout the state to be awarded those dispensaries. I've not been briefed on the success or where those are actually located. I know every I guess DPS district has a dispensary, but I've not been made aware of how that's playing out. But to your point, it doesn't do any good to have the dispensaries, have the program, have it ready to go, and veterans are not aware of it, or people that need it for brain trauma or any of the other illnesses or maladies that we tried to address by expanding the program. I think that's a critical part of the equation to make sure that the public is aware of that. Not only the medical community, but even perhaps the medical community may not be aware of what's now available through that program as opposed to their traditional methods of treating disorders. So
What's the role?
I support that.
What's the role of the state in that? As regulatory agencies, do they do these kinds of education campaigns for other programs?
You know, quite frankly, I don't know what. Maybe guys like Mitch would know what's out there right now before the dispensaries have been expanded. One of the complaints the witnesses showed is they didn't have access. It took months and months to have access, and we listened. We tried to react. I don't know what the state does now, to tell you the truth, on advertising the availability of the program. So maybe the center does.
But certainly, and no, I don't. But certainly, we do know that the state does have outreach and information programs on many different things, and other things it does not. It's not a consistent thing, and that's another place where your advocacy can be helpful.
We talked a lot about hemp policy in this conversation, so I'm really grateful that TCOP got brought up and the expansion of that program, both of you supporting broader access. We now have more qualifying conditions, more product types available, and as has been discussed, more statewide distribution with more licenses coming in. Do you have any other questions? Oh, yeah. Go.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Bauer, and I just have a question talking about the education when in the communities. I think when we saw the lieutenant governor's tantrum, where he was throwing you want this gummy, you want this gummy, he was saying he projected it as like, they're coming for our kids, it's a danger to our kids. And I don't know if anyone's aware, in 2006, he was one of the responsible authors of eliminating health education from our classrooms. As a PhD candidate in health education and public health in schools, I find this very alarming because this is where our kids get the information as well as the engagement with parents to ensure that they know the severity, the perceived threat of engaging in any type of health behavior. Number one being our cannabis usage. Now, since then, we've seen health education be eliminated from our classrooms. To y'all's knowledge, it could be either one. Has there been a conversation, if this is such an important thing, to bring it back into the classrooms and ensuring implementation in our public schools?
I do not see an expansion of important knowledge to children going on in the state.
On the grounds that my answer may tend to incriminate you, I will refrain from answering that question. Pending the 90th legislative session coming up. So,
and this is yes, go ahead, Mitch.
I want to thank you both for being here today and your support for this, and to kind of illuminate on the issue. We got to get our minds wrapped around the Second Amendment. The TCUP and testing positive for use of marijuana, even the TCUP program, affects the Second Amendment rights, and we've got issues with that. And so just remind both of you that, one of our talking points during the session was we want both. We want access to both. Some veterans don't want to use a TCUP program because they don't want to be on a list. They don't want to have their child custody, their access to the Second Amendment right to own firearms. So that's something to keep in mind here. And it's expensive. TCUP is more expensive. And so we got veterans who want to use TCUP. The THC level is more powerful than 0.03 legal gummies. So again, our view is we want access to both. And I'll repeat what I said when I was on the panel today. We will not get caught in the cannabis civil war. The hemp and marijuana industries are at odds with each other. Senator, that's a great point, because the Teacup program, in a lot of ways, it's a state-sponsored monopoly. You know, it's very expensive to get a license. They're very, very limited, and the access to it, you got to go to a doctor, you got to get a prescription. It may cost $300 or $400 a month. Some veterans want to go down that path. Others don't. I prefer to buy a package of 10 gummies from a good actor, and we got to get our minds wrapped around. There's bad stuff on the shelves, stuff coming in from China, other countries. Darby, to your point, let's get that crap off the shelves. And there's good actors in this room, man. We work with good actors. We work with the Texas Hemp Business Council, so we work with those good actors. And you remember what I said in the state affairs hearing? I'm not going to knowingly put poison into my body, but this is a state where we have freedom, and we fought for freedom. And a lot of us fought on foreign soil and harm's way. So let us be adults, and the governor's you, and let us choose what we want to put in our body.
And Mitch brought up a really good point. You pick somebody else to hit that way, about the licensing fees and the compassionate use program. I mean, it's almost $500,000 for a 2-year license, and then $315,000 every 2 years after that. And that's been in place for 10 years since it was originally established. So my question is, and just for everyone's general benefit of the process, what is the legislature's role in holding agencies accountable when they don't correct that type of thing?
Well, agencies are charged with implementing the laws that we pass. Where we don't pass laws, sometimes they just go ahead and do stuff, but sometimes they should. If they want to set a particular licensing fee, my understanding, I'm not a scholar on this, but if the legislature passes a law that sets a different licensing fee, that's what the licensing fee is. I may be wrong about that, but I believe that's the way it goes.
Override.
When we pass a law that says that this program that we want implemented is charged to an agency, and we direct that agency to recover the cost to administer that program, that's what, from my perspective, that is what we're trying to do, is have that program generate the revenue for the oversight, supervision, regulation of that industry. Just from what I've seen of the current fees, it would look like to me that the fees set are grossing far more money than it takes to regulate the industry. It looks to be more a revenue generating fee structure than a regulatory oversight structure. And I would say that's on the plate before that the legislature has in the next legislative session.
Make that note.
Yeah, I just want to thank you both for being here as well. And Chairman, when the committee substitute for SB3 was introduced, I actually texted Heather. I said, WTF just happened. You guys were very close to setting a legitimate framework for adult use cannabis throughout Texas. So the question is, was the governor involved in the discussion? And do you think that is kind of our starting point for next session? And then a follow-up to the senator to discuss the disproportionality between cannabis concentrates and cannabis flower. I know you've done some work on that in the past.
Now, certainly the governor's position, of course, I'm not privy to every thought coming out of the governor's office or his staff, but the governor usually kind of keeps a lot of his thoughts until we decide. He kind of defers to the process and then weighs in. I don't recall having a conversation about what the governor's position was. I don't know that he actually developed that to the end, till you weighed in. But, you know, having sat on LAP, the Licensing Procedure Committee in the Texas House, and seeing how the process works to regulate industry, certainly the alcohol industry, that's in our wheelhouse. We know how to do that, you know, and so we kind of defer. You know, we had people, I'll just pick infused beverages, you know, that we all see on the shelf at Specs or Total Wine or wherever. I was asking, maybe in committee hearing, I said, who are your customers? And they said, our biggest customers, which now form about 13% of their total business, by the way. This is not insignificant. I said, who are your biggest customer? And they said, soccer moms. Literally. They come in after dropping their kids off to school, and they'll get a 6-pack to get them through the day. I mean, so when you start affecting soccer moms, you got some political pressure there. So anyway, we're going to take a look at this. I mean, but you guys have to engage from today until then, in order to give policymakers and our staffs. I've got 2 staff members here in the back, Laramie Stroud, my chief of staff, and Santino Camacho, my legislative director. If you have issues that you want to run by me, these guys are the pros, and they know what they're actually talking about. But look forward to that advocacy during this period of time. This is when the sausage is made. We're making sausage now.
And I want to also thank you for acknowledging our staff. They do so much great work. And I do have my chief of staff, Lonnie Lappinga, and my legislative director, Alvaro Diaz, are both here. And we're happy to hear from you anytime. I appreciate the question about what we call penalty parity. Again, I'm trying to have a consistent regulatory structure. And if somebody, perhaps a kid, eats a pot brownie that's made with the cannabis oil, or smokes a joint or has a joint in their glove compartment, they could have equivalent levels of THC, but the kid who ate the brownie is a felon, and you might have a Class B misdemeanor in the other case for the exact same THC content. How can that still be on the books? How could I not have passed that yet? I mean, I've gotten it through committee a couple times. So I think that's the kind of consistency, that general approach we need to take towards this whole category of products. So thank you for being aware of that. And maybe we can pass it next session.
So this brings up maybe our final question before any closing remarks that y'all have. There's one big roadblock in all of this. So how are we going to advance things that make sense when there is a huge roadblock that is all or nothing prohibitionist, keeping reasonable legislation from passing? I mean, we couldn't even get age restrictions done during special session because if it wasn't prohibition, it wasn't moving in the other chamber in the Senate. How do we overcome this?
I mean, I have one solution that all of y'all, I think that the governor already kind of has it well underway by kicking this over to the agency. These regulations are coming down no matter what. Lieutenant governor is in favor of a ban. The House probably, I mean, there was just some wrangling that went on last session. I don't think the game is going to be played to the same result next time around. So I doubt a ban moves, particularly when the governor's got the regulatory regime moving in place. So we could make it less likely that there's a big showdown over a ban if we are all participating in the regulatory process and transfer that into a lawmaking process. I think his leverage is not going on that issue is not going to be the same this session as it was last session.
I'm not saying that the House is enlightened, but
Government.
government. But I will tell you that, from my perspective, and I think the House perspective, we're going to listen to good ideas about good policy. I noticed with interest somebody from the Speaker's policy office is here. Thanks for that. I will tell you the Speaker of the House lets the House do our work. And so I'm grateful to the Speaker and to his staff for being here. And let's, this is evolving on multiple fronts, not only at the federal level, but certainly here in the states, and other states. So I would just say continue the dialogue, continue to engage your elected officials, continue to give us the information that we need to make good policy decisions, and hopefully we will.
Well, it's nice to have such a well-rounded conversation, the Democrat or Republican, the Senate, the House, rural and urban, representing folks from all across Texas that care about this issue, are taking it seriously and moving forward. And I think you've given us some excellent insights and opportunities for setting ourselves up for success and meaningful policy changes during the next legislative session. So help me thank our guests. Thank you, Donald.